This is Rachel Dolezal, and you're listening to Fascination Street Podcast.
I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street. Welcome back, Streetwalkers. This episode is with Charlie Shrem. Some of you may know Charlie Shrem from the crypto and Bitcoin world, and the rest of you may know Charlie Shrem as being the husband of previous guest Courtney Warner Shrem and one of the producers of the Ask Me to Dance film, which I won't stop talking about for some reason. In this episode, we talked to Charlie about where he grew up and the community that he grew up in, as well as how he became an early adopter of the Bitcoin movement and community. We talk about some of the things that he has been able to accomplish with the help of Bitcoin and because of Bitcoin. And then we talk about some of the trouble that he got into with the United States federal government revolving around Bitcoin and some finance laws. We talk a little bit about his podcast, Untold Stories, which I highly recommend. He breaks down some things in the tech and nerd world and makes it digestible and understandable for people who maybe are not super good at technology and things like myself. Anyway, it was a good time. I had a blast talking to Charlie. I think you're going to have a wonderful time listening to this conversation. And this is my conversation with early adopter of and super vocal advocate for cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, Charlie Shrem.
Yeah, talk to me, yeah.
Welcome to Fascination Street Podcast, Charlie Shrem. It's Shrem, right?
Yeah.
When I was talking to your wife, I think the first half of the show I said Shram, and the second half I said Shrem, I think.
On the show, you called her Courtney Warner Shrem.
Uh-huh.
And the way it came off the tongue, she actually likes it. And she's talking to her people to see if maybe to change her name, her stage name from like Courtney Warner to Courtney Warner Shrem because of your podcast.
Really?
Yeah. It sounded good.
How cool am I?
A lot of people liked the way it sounded. They heard that, they're like, oh, Courtney, that's what you should be. It's like longer names are in now.
Yeah, isn't that weird? How you doing today, man?
It's good to be here. I'm feeling good. Knock on wood.
Is that real wood?
It's probably not. I'm going to write down a message to myself.
Get real wood.
Knock on wood later.
You know that thing that the judge bangs the gavel on? Not the gavel, but the thing he hits, that little square block of wood. You should just get one of those and put it in there so that whenever you say knock on wood, you can just knock on that.
Yeah, when I was in like elementary school, I remember I had a teacher who couldn't control the class. And one day she walked in with one of these like gavels like that, like it was like a golden gavel. And she's like, whoever the best student in class is gets this gavel. And for like a few days, I actually strived to be a good student because I really wanted it. But then I realized I wasn't going to get the top grades in class, so I just gave up.
And then you started becoming a problem.
Yeah, actually, that day, I started becoming a problem.
Hilarious. So I previously talked to your wife, Courtney Warner Shrem. She was awesome. She is awesome. We didn't really talk a whole lot about you, almost not at all, because I knew that we were going to have this conversation. So I didn't want to let any of those cats out of the bag during that previous episode. But I will say that since you did listen to her episode of my show, you know how we start. I like to help us get to understand who you are by understanding where you came from and how you grew up. So where were you born and raised, man? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York. I was raised in a very religious family. It was the only world I knew at the time. And I grew up in a very nice community of like-minded people. And it was different than the way most other people grow up.
What way?
Well, the whole community that I grew up in just kind of looks out for themselves. We have the same, houses of worship. We would have our own schools, our own restaurants. You marry our own people. We had our own version of AAA. If your car broke down, instead of calling AAA, you'd call Chaverim, which was like translated to friends in Hebrew. So, because they'd come and help you out because they were one of our community. So I grew up in this world of my community was everything. It was your whole life. It were the people that have to look out for you and you look out for them because of destiny, because you were born into this community. And it was a really nice upbringing. But at the same time, as I got older, I realized that while it's really nice for most people that want to be in it, it wasn't for me. And I wanted to spread my wings and do something else and figure out where I fit in the world. There was something I was always itching for that. I was very fortunate to have discovered Bitcoin and at the same time met Courtney because she gave me the ability to run to someone and start a new life with her outside of that community. And then the Bitcoin gave us both a purpose because back then in 2011, everyone was laughing at Bitcoin. It was a joke. Like, why would anyone want to be involved in this magic internet money? It was stupid. 10 years later, obviously it's not. But back then, the beauty of Bitcoin was it was our thing. It was me and Courtney and then our new little community of Bitcoiners that was just us. We joke, Courtney and I, the 2011 to the end of 2013, those were the golden years of Bitcoin. That was the golden age. That was when there was no real value to Bitcoin from a price perspective. It wasn't something that was unattainable for anyone who wanted to get involved. Anyone can get involved, have a bunch of them, join the community, contribute in some meaningful way, to the point where it was very embracing. And we were both looking for communities to embrace us. Like you said on your show, everything she had went into a garbage bag. And then she came to New York City. Around that same time, I was getting kicked out of my family. So I packed everything that I had owned into my car in Brooklyn. I wrote my parents a letter. This was like 8 years ago or something, or 9 years ago. And I'd never spoken to them or seen them since then. So Courtney and I had the opportunity to start this really beautiful family together at the same time. Our destinies matched.
So this community that you were born and raised in, it was centered around religion. And you ended up leaving the community because you didn't really feel like you belonged there, or it wasn't for you. Is that right?
Yeah, there are a lot of like little things I can point to. But overall, I just didn't fit in. Even from as a young age, I didn't fit in under the guise of like, oh, Charlie's just really smart, so he's questioning everything all the time. He's harmless. He's just trying to expand the community's outlook or like technology. They were very against technology and they were very against the idea of Bitcoin being this vehicle that I could use to travel the world and not be at home. I was from a place where it's like you have to eat kosher food. You're praying 3 times a day. There's no room for anything else to consume your life other than community and the religion. It's a great thing. Like, it was great, and it's great for everyone who's in it. I have nothing against it. It just wasn't for me. The only shame is that there's no way for my family or community to figure out how to have a relationship with Courtney and I outside of the community. It's an all or nothing thing. It's a shame that in the modern world that we have today, we're in an enlightened world where pre-enlightenment, pre-1800s, the idea of everyone being equal wasn't even real. Like pre-1800s, we had slavery and indentured servitude, and then the Enlightenment came, and people were like, wait a minute, we're all born with human rights. We're all the same. And that's a world that I want to live in.
Not to harp on it too much, just so that I can hopefully understand it a little better. The community that you grew up in, is it like as depicted on Netflix's Unorthodox? Is it kind of like that?
It's exactly the same community.
Oh, okay.
I should have prefaced that for those who have watched that show. But I grew up in almost the same community in Brooklyn and exact same thing. Like when I'm watching that show, it actually gives me so much nostalgia because I miss the food. I miss a lot of the lingo, the quips, the style of thinking, the problem-solving mentality that people in my community grow up with. I really like that and attracted to that. I think the show did a really good job from an outsider perspective now, but having been an insider perspective, is the show does a really good job portraying the good, but at the same time the bad, because when you watch that show, there's no enemy, there's no bad person, there's no demon, there's no demagogue. You understand the religious side of it, but you understand the family side of it. There was a little bit of like eccentricity, like there's a lot of like flashiness and clothes and wealth and stuff, which is not normal for the community. They just happen to be wealthy, so they make a good TV show. But overall, it's a very positive community with a lot of negatives, but they work on themselves from within. But again, I was like her. I knew that I was going to be unhappy every day the rest of my life. And I remember telling myself as a kid, I'd rather live a happy life that's my choosing, that live an unhappy life that's chosen for me.
Well said. So you left the community, but did you leave the religion?
Courtney and I were not religious in any sense of like where we force ourselves to not do something, but we embrace religion in all the positive sense, where we'll celebrate Hanukkah, Christmas, we'll do parties, dinners, family events. We're very traditional and positive in that sense. New Year's, we'll follow the pork and sauerkraut and then listen to Old Enzyme. And there's a lot of different communities in religion. I'm like, I celebrate Satoshi's birthday now. I follow the Church of Satoshi. I'm probably the biggest gospel out there for the Church of Satoshi. Like, I replace one religion with another.
I feel like we all do.
Yeah.
What is Satoshi?
Satoshi Nakamoto was the creator, inventor of Bitcoin. He's anonymous. No one knows who he is, what he is, if it's a group of people. Satoshi had written 12 pages of a white paper back in 2009 and then released it to a very small community of what was called cypherpunks, which were like people that were interested in mathematics and cryptography. And obviously, when he wrote what he conceived as this invention to have a decentralized money, that the ledger is not maintained by any one party, rather that ledger is maintained on millions of computers in real time, that was the holy grail even before Satoshi existed. If you talk to any computer scientist, cryptographer, mathematician, they'll tell you that Byzantine fault tolerance is what they called it, because the problem had existed from the Byzantine times. The day computers were invented, the days that the modern PC, the day that the internet, that we had the ability to connect personal computers, which is really just an extension of connecting our brains with each other. Mathematicians very quickly figured out, it's like, how do we have computers or a ledger making decisions on their own without having a person making the decision for them? And then how do we protect that network from outside attackers? Up until Satoshi came along, that was impossible. The only thing you could do is set up 10 computers and say, as long as 6 out of 10 make the decision, then that's consensus. That's a decision that needs to be made. The other 4 decisions are orphaned. 51%, majority rules. But that never prevents an attacker or another, 3, 4 more computers from coming in. It's the same thing like taking over the board of a company or taking over the board of a homeowners association. It's the same type of thing. Satoshi figured out a way to do it. He wrote a paper explaining how he would do it, and everyone said he was wrong. Everyone said he was an idiot. You got to read. People need to go back and read the early writings of Satoshi. You can go to like nakamotoinstitute.org or .com and check it out. It's really great. I have the white paper. I've read it hundreds of times. I have it on my wall. We have it on our wall at the house. Like, I'll just go and glance. That's why I said it. Like, I study the white paper and the writings of Satoshi like it's a Bible, because in the future, we'll look at the invention of Bitcoin, or really the solution of Byzantine fault tolerance. We'll look at that as a human leap. Humankind leaped with Satoshi. We had reached peak invention. Up until 2009, 2010, we were reaching the peak of our human capacity for mathematics, physics, and computer science, of how it all ties together. The best thing that we could do was Moore's Law, which is basically chips are going to get smaller and they're going to become faster, and we could almost predict that. But humankind, our brains had not had the ability to fathom what Satoshi had invented. And that's why that community, that mailing list, said, you're an idiot. So Satoshi went along and a few months later released this code base with 100 lines of code, which was the invention of Bitcoin. He got a few people to download it and start running the network. And that was the Genesis block. That was the invention of the Bitcoin network. And since then, more and more people have been joining the Bitcoin network. I was one of those early people who joined the Bitcoin network. I was mining on my computer. You could mine hundreds of Bitcoin a day. I wish we'd kept them all. And back then, Satoshi was around talking to everyone. But then Bitcoin got too big. This was the end of 2010. So Bitcoin got too big very quickly, and Satoshi just disappeared. And we've never seen or heard from him since, or her or them since.
Why do you think they disappeared?
There's a lot of schools of thought on like who Satoshi is, why he or she disappeared. There's a recent Vice TV show called Cryptoland, and they have me quoting there. They said, who do you think Satoshi is? And I, like, jokingly, but really, I am as confident as I am being right, as I am as confident as I am as being wrong with what I'm about to say. Satoshi, or the group of Satoshi, could very well be time travelers or extraterrestrials coming from a future humankind. Listen, the human brain, we don't understand time. We don't understand physics. We can't even scratch the surface. It's like, that's why physicists, and they come off as crazy to us, is because they don't even understand half the things that they're learning every single day, because we don't have the ability to make those connections in our brain yet. And so we can't even understand it. That's why Satoshi was looked at as such a negative thing. But it could just be a group of academics. It could be one person, a Japanese kid in his basement. Satoshi's invention was taking all of this past work that was done by cryptographers, Byzantine generals, and he amalgamated all these inventions into one and then brought it all together. And it was beautiful.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
You are a wealth of information, my friend. I feel like we could just have a podcast together where I just go, hey, how come? And then you can just finish the rest of the show. Oh my God, you're amazing.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
You know those popping phone handle things that you see on everyone's phones nowadays? Well, how would you like to put your logo on them? Does your podcast or band need new merch? Do you want to bring attention to your new book or film? Maybe you need something unique for your Patreon or crowdfunding campaign. Then visit thelogopop.com, where you can customize them with the logo of your podcast, band, business, art, school mascot, or whatever else you can think of. These are way more affordable than you may think at thelogopop.com. Mention where you heard this ad and get free shipping on your entire order. Remember, that's thelogopop.com to order your custom popping phone handles. That's thelogopop.com.
Let's get back into it.
You said you were an early adopter of Bitcoin. How did you, you said you were an early adopter and that you were mining it on your computer and stuff. How did you come to be an early adopter of Bitcoin? Like, how did it come across your radar?
I was in a chat room, which is where my social community was at the time. I was hanging out in IRC and a bunch of chat rooms, and I'd heard someone talking about Bitcoin, that it was just this thing to check out, and I thought it was stupid at the time. IRC was the only place that people talked about Bitcoin at the time, so it was very easy to like jump into the other chat room.
What is IRC?
Internet Relay Chat. IRC was the precursor to instant messaging that we use today. There are still IRC servers set up. People are hanging out in IRC chat rooms, but after like message boards, IRC in the 90s became like the de facto way that people would chat with each other. IRC was important because IRC was somewhat a permissionless system. You didn't need permission to join a server, right? You didn't need to like have an AOL account or pay money to have an account and join that and input your first and last name and then your phone number and all this stuff. You could join an IRC and people judged you based on the things that you said and did, and not by your avatar or your name or where your account was from or any of these other things. You created a reputation solely on what's in here and not what's out here. And Bitcoin, to a large extent, was the exact same thing. Bitcoin and crypto are like the anti-rent seeker world. You can't join it and try to just extract value from it. You have to contribute to that world in some way, or else it's going to kick you out on your ass. But I found Bitcoin very quickly, and I couldn't just like hang around and ask questions. I needed to like join this community somehow. And so I started selling products on the Bitcoin chat rooms for Bitcoin. I was, I think, the first person to do that. You go to the early like forum.bitcoin.org in early 2011. I was selling like pocket knives and plane tickets, vouchers, and magazine subscriptions, anything I could find online cheap and resell. I wasn't even trying to make a profit. I was just trying to earn some Bitcoin. But at the same time, I was trying to provide value to the Bitcoin community. And at the same time, while doing that, I created an economy, because now people were attracting a value to this Bitcoin thing. Here, you can earn this Bitcoin thing from other people for doing tasks and services. And here, the Shrem kid is now selling stuff, airline vouchers, for Bitcoin. We created like a little round economy. Just that existed in our small group of people. But at the time, that was enough for us. That's all we wanted. We never wanted Bitcoin to be where it is today. I mean, we hoped and dreamed But at the same time, I think we all secretly wanted Bitcoin to remain as small as it was. I mean, back then, there's this huge conference in Las Vegas, Money 2020. It's big. Every year, Vegas, Money 2020. It's like the biggest. It actually launched in 2014. Every big bank has a booth. It's big speakers. The White House CFO comes and speaks. It's like a whole big government, private, financial services related conference. And I remember that first year, their first one we ever launched, we called up the organizers, myself, Roger Ver, and Eric Voorhees, and we said, we don't care how big of a booth we have. We don't even need a booth. Give us a lamppost that we can just hang a Bitcoin sign from, and we want to be next to PayPal. Because PayPal at the time was the walled garden that all Bitcoiners couldn't really be a part of. Back then, PayPal didn't allow you to have an account if you didn't prescribe to what they wanted you to do with it. You couldn't sell online gaming related stuff. It was hard to sell products and services. If you sold anything on PayPal, the money was held for like 6 months and then anyone can charge it back. It was a very like anti-business brand at the time. If you were a business and you wanted to accept money, you had to accept PayPal. PayPal even did like credit card processing. But at the same time, if you ran a business, and I know a lot of your listeners are probably shaking their heads, if you ran a business anytime in like 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, it was really difficult to make money accepting online payments. Your chargeback rate was like 10 or 20%. And that's where Bitcoiners really in the beginning, like we shined bright.
You're also pretty well known as being a very vocal advocate for crypto, more specifically Bitcoin. How did you become known for being an advocate? Like you just mentioned that Vice show where I guess they asked you some questions, like how did they know to go to you? How does that happen that you become known as the advocate?
So you have those early years, and there were very few people involved in those early years, and most of them are not around anymore. So there's very few people who are still around and still very active in the space and have kind of their finger on the pulse. But I didn't get here for any of that. So I became an advocate of Bitcoin. I started loving it. And I realized, this is 2011, I realized that we needed to make getting Bitcoin easier. It's not good enough to make it where it's like someone could earn it or buy from someone else through like a forum type of Craigslist style mechanism, which is how you would buy and sell Bitcoin. It was like an internal Craigslist. It was like markets.bitcoin.org, and you'd post like, I want to buy 10,000 Bitcoin for $100. And then someone would send you a message in there and say yes, and you'd figure out how you guys want to transact with each other. And I was like, well, this is not sustainable. So I met this guy on the forums, and he had this idea to basically like maintain a large balance of dollars and Bitcoin, and then people could walk into our bank accounts in the US, deposit money, and we'd instantly give them Bitcoin. And I was like, that sounds great. He wrote a piece of software that made it all automatic. It was very smart how he did it. He made it that he could recognize any bank deposit to match the customer. And then that was very attractive. So he made a deal with these companies, MoneyGram, Walmart, Walgreens, Duane Reade, CVS. All of those companies have MoneyGram, and they also have the ability for you to walk in, scan a barcode, and give the cashier money. So I integrated with their software where if you go to my website, say, I want to spend up to $300 because that was the maximum you can buy. It was like $300-400 worth of Bitcoin. It wasn't in the thousands or even 10,000. Most people just wanted to buy a few $100 worth of Bitcoin. You could go there, print out a barcode from my website or show it on your screen, go to the store like 7-Eleven, scan it, give the cashier your money minus a small fee. You get Bitcoin 20 minutes later. And that was revolutionary, not just in the Bitcoin world, but that was revolutionary for anything. The ability to do that. So this was called BitInstant. And we were growing very, very fast. For 2 years, we were 30% of the global Bitcoin volume. We were pretty much like half of all of the Bitcoin traded on any day was going through our system. It was crazy. This was 2013 now. Bitcoin started to get a lot of attention. It was getting mainstream media press. The price went to like $1,200 for one Bitcoin. It was getting seen as this like, what is it? Is this a running fad? Is this new money? No one really took it seriously. They were laughing at us mostly, but it made good press. It was something shiny to look at for people. The government came out and said Bitcoin is now considered money. And so any business operating within Bitcoin needs to have enhanced compliance and filing suspicious activity reports and all these new type of requirements, which we weren't doing at the time. Courtney and I were together, actually. We were dating, and I got arrested. We had shut down the company 6 months prior to this because we knew that we couldn't operate within the same legal framework that the government was now requiring. And one of our customers had bought Bitcoin from us and then resold that Bitcoin on this marketplace called Silk Road. So those two combined together made for a very good case. And I got arrested and went through like a year of house arrest and going through like trial and everything. I didn't complain. I didn't throw anyone under the bus. I didn't blame the government. I just blamed myself. It was my fault. I was a stupid, naive kid, and I should have been more aware of the kind of groundbreaking shit that we were doing. And so at the age of 23 years old, I'm getting sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. And so the amazing independent life that I thought I wanted had landed me in federal prison. I'm like, shit, maybe I should just go back to this community. Yeah, right. I was like, maybe I didn't make the maybe I didn't make the best.
Holy shit, they were right.
Actually, my parents, I was wrong. That was the next time that I saw my parents. My parents were at the bail hearing, and they told the judge that they'll make sure I'll stay on house arrest as long as I can live in their house. I have to live in their house. I couldn't live in their apartment anymore. I have to be religious again, and I had to break up with Courtney. That was their rule. So for 6 months, we hid the fact that we were still together. And when my parents found out, it got crazy. It got crazy. I actually can't talk about what happened because the judge had sealed those hearings, but it got crazy. But luckily, I was able to spend the rest of my house arrest with Courtney in my own apartment, because by that time I already knew that I was getting 2 years, because why would anyone run, right? Why would anyone run at any point ever? Like, even if you're facing a certain amount of time. I met a U.S. Marshal once, and he told me, we've never not gotten anyone. The only person that they couldn't get was Whitey Bulger. And you know what? When I was in prison about 6 months into it, we heard a helicopter, and they had a big prison lockdown. We all had to go on the ground. Do you know why? Because Whitey Bulger had just gotten arrested and showed up. Remember when they found him? I was in prison when they found him. So it's like, never run. I can tell you stories of people who tried to run who were in prison with me. Their stories are crazy. Like, one guy was driving an ice cream truck through the U.S. It's crazy stuff. Like, but anyways, I got arrested and I thought my life was over. But actually, that's when for the first time, I was able to experience true love through that experience. Courtney gave up her whole acting career at the time, and she was growing very quickly. She had just done a foreign film in Denmark. She gave it all up, moved back to Pennsylvania so she could be like an hour away from me, visited me every other week, the maximum allowed. I don't think she missed one allowed visiting day, supported me while I was in there. And when I got out, the Bitcoin and tech community kind of saw me as a martyr and embraced me and welcomed me back in a very big way. And when I got arrested, every single company, even Coinbase at the time, which everyone knows, wasn't asking for your ID to buy Bitcoin. The day I got arrested, every single company in the world, the few that were around, used that as a red flag and said, okay, we need to start collecting IDs and taking this Bitcoin thing seriously, because the government arrested Charlie. Now they're taking Bitcoin seriously. And since that day, the whole crypto industry has started taking itself a little bit more serious because of that. So I had to pay like $1 million to the federal government, which I paid, like a restitution. When I got out of prison, I probably had like $20,000 or $30,000 to my name. But I was able to use that, buy a bunch of Bitcoin, which were only $200-$300 when I got out in 2016. That was right before it exploded to like 10,000 and before it exploded to like 70,000. So I was able to get in on a lot of really good projects and companies before they went public. And God has been with us, or whoever, the Sky people. And Courtney and I were able to like rebuild our financial independence. We moved down to Florida. She's acting again. I get to be working in crypto. And, you know, America loves a comeback kid. And they gave me a second chance. And I'm not going to ruin it.
Wow. The comeback kid. I like it.
Now I got to knock on wood 3 times after this is over.
I'll send you a piece of wood flooring. Just go to Home Depot and just get a sample piece of wood flooring.
I like doing podcasts where you ask me all these questions because the best part of prison was I got humility training. There's nothing better for the soul than when someone rips out your dignity and you're just left feeling like shit. You know you fucked up, and it's like now you got to rebuild, and you go in and you like think back on your actions. We all know those moments, and we all wish that we had more of them. Obviously, we don't like to be embarrassed, or we don't want to bring shame upon ourselves, but humility training is powerful. I just got a dose of it a few weeks ago, actually, where I thought I was so right about something, and God, I was so wrong, but in the process of trying to be right, I embarrassed a bunch of people. So thank you for having me on your show. Not that I'm not ending it or anything, but I just really want to say thank you, because when you allow me to talk to myself about this stuff, it reminds me where I came from. And I can never forget where I came from. I can never forget where I came from. We can never forget where we came from, because then we're going to be wandering aimlessly. And I started a podcast called Untold Stories just to remind people every single day why Bitcoin was even invented, because then we can know where we're going.
Kick ass. You said earlier that a bunch of the people who were among the first in the community of crypto and Bitcoin are not around anymore. Is it because they died of old age, or is there some nefarious things going on in that? Like, where'd they go?
No, there weren't very many people involved in Bitcoin in the years 2010 to 2012 to begin with. So you can imagine not a lot of them are still in the space, just because I can go down the line each person. But I mean, a lot of times people from the early days, myself included, we want to take a back seat. We don't want to be the CEOs anymore of the companies. We don't want to be the trailblazers anymore, because we trailblazed the early days. And now it's time to like kind of take a step back and let the newer generation have their opportunity to trailblaze in our space, and let them make the money, let them make the mistakes, let them make the right choices. That's a lot of the belief, because the early Bitcoiners don't have a lot in common with the current crypto space. It's really moved on. That early Bitcoin space was like an anarcho-capitalist. We were very political. Bitcoin was about democratizing people. It was about taking that same type of like, you're being judged for what's in here, and bringing it to the real world. That's really what Bitcoin was about. It still is about for me, because we were the people that were disenfranchised. Every early Bitcoiner was someone who didn't fit in their life somehow. So we were the fringe people. We were the misfits. So we were trying to create a better, equitable community for ourselves, and then maybe for our children. But over the years, it's just burnout. We've succeeded in our goals. A lot of people have gotten really wealthy, and now using that wealth to do a lot of amazing things. Like one of my friends had created this thing called the $87 million Anonymous Pineapple Fund, which was an $87 million charity, which was set up. People just sending anonymous Bitcoin donations to do things, and you can track everything that's going on, because everything in Bitcoin is trackable. When you're sending a large amount of money to a pot, you can still follow where that money goes on the other side. Where in traditional finance, you can't. Finance is completely untransparent. You can't watch money flow, so you don't know what's going on. It democratized people. For example, if I wasn't a felon, if I was just a normal person, if you or I walked into a bank and we want to get a $100,000 mortgage, there are probably 3 or 4 different middlemen and fees that people get along the way. And so that your cash to close is maybe $70,000 or whatever it is after your interest rate. If you're black, or if you're someone who walks in there and you're a minority, or if you're flamboyant looking, or if you're, just looking, not even, it doesn't matter. If you're someone who's not seen as the same as the person sitting behind that desk or the risk portfolio, the fees and the middlemen and the risk is going to be different. And we know it's true. We know it's true. Congress has tried to pass laws, and that's just with the mortgage industry. If you had the money flow more transparent, now it doesn't need, we're not talking about anonymous. We're talking about transparency in money. If we take that same thing with data and with everything else, that's what Satoshi wanted. We want it to be equitable. We wanted everyone working on the same playing field, because let's look back at the French Revolution for a second. The problem is that you still had a bunch of people in charge that started killing everyone with the guillotine or whatever. But the idea behind the French Revolution was you could be born at the lowest class. You could be the lowest person, but you could be president. Look right now, and I forget her name. I've been listening the past 2 days. The Congress right now, they're going through her nomination. She's Biden's first pick. She is an African American woman from South Miami, and she's now being appointed to the highest court in America. That's fucking amazing. Like, that's so amazing. That didn't exist 10, 20, 30, hundreds of years ago. What Bitcoin is and what crypto is and what you're going to see with this blockchain technology thing is that it's going to overturn every industry where you can't do what she did. That's going to overturn that.
I believe her name is Ketanji Jackson.
Ketanji Jackson. She's badass. I don't even follow her politics. I have no idea where she stands on most issues. I don't really care. But I'm a big fan of, first of all, I've been watching all the congressmen and congresswomen like ask her questions, and the way she just sits there and smiles and pays attention. I've never met someone who could actively listen better than her right now. That's amazing.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
If you'd like to help find answers for the families of unsolved crime victims from all over, or perhaps identify a Jane or John Doe, please visit DNAsolves.com, where you can submit your DNA from a consumer testing company like Ancestry or 23andMe to their database. DNAsolves.com.
Let's get back into it.
So I don't know how much of this you're allowed to talk about, but you have history with the Winklevoss twins. What history do you have with them, and then how did that end?
There's nothing that, well, of course, I should say there's nothing that can't be talked about. But Cameron and Tyler are very smart people that very quickly realized the future potential of Bitcoin when I met them in 2012 on a beach. Well, actually, my friend originally met them and was the one who introduced me to them. But it was like a month or two after they had won their big Facebook lawsuit. This was like right when that movie ends, The Social Network, or the book. I forgot the name of the book, but it was The Social Network. They had decided to invest in BitInstant. They were our first investor. Through us, they had bought like thousands and thousands of Bitcoin. And I was their poster child. Like, they would introduce me to their friends and family as this wonder child. They staked their whole reputation on me. And then the day I got arrested, I brought shame to them. I embarrassed them. And they don't like being embarrassed. They got embarrassed with the Facebook thing, and I embarrassed them for the second time. And so the relationship died that day.
And then they sued you.
And then like 8 years later, they found out I was doing well here. And they claimed that like 8 years ago, I took some amount of Bitcoin for them. And they sued me. And yeah, that case ended. It was a good case.
It ended?
Yeah, that case ended.
It just ended.
It just ended. I mean, if you follow, anyone could go to pacer.com and read and follow what happened there. And that's literally what just happened. It just ended.
Gotcha. Well, I have never been sued for, I think it was $32 million. So I'm happy that that's never happened to me.
Yeah.
What was going through your mind when they sued you? Like when you got notified or served or whatever that you were getting sued by the Winklevi for $32 million, did you poop in your pants, or were you just like...
I did.
Oh, good.
I did. I mean, I was freaked out. No one likes being sued, and I would never, until today, I don't like to even approach the idea of having lawyers involved in any business transaction because I think it's like such a last step. But I knew that they were potentially suing me for emotional reasons, and I got legal advice to that extent. Basically, let them run their course with this and just take it, for lack of a better term. Which what I did.
Gotcha.
And it ran its course and it ended.
I love that you keep saying it ended. I'm not even gonna go any further than that. I don't even care. I just love that you just keep saying it ended because it did. So I think that's hilarious. Tell me more about Untold Stories. I know you mentioned it briefly a few minutes ago why you started it, but tell my listeners what it's about and where they can find it and why you're doing it.
Well, actually, I started my podcast right around that time of that lawsuit because here I was like years later, I'm out of prison. I paid back the government and everything, and I'm on good terms with them now, with the judge. I'm getting sued for stuff that was obviously not true and that most people didn't even remember. And so there were a lot of emotional PTSD and stress that I was coming from that. It's one thing to be sued when you think you may be wrong or something, but it's another thing to be sued when you know you're right. It sucks. And so I started the podcast for that reason. It was my emotional outlet. I had too much time on my hands, and my lawyer was like, go do something where you can just talk a lot. Just go do crypto or Bitcoin. He's like, you have too much time on your hands. You're getting stressed out from this. He's like, let us handle it. And so I got the best legal advice was to start a new company. It was great. And 3 years later, and UntoldStories.com, my podcast, or wherever you get your audio, is where I talk to Bitcoin and crypto's earliest people to truly understand how the movement came to be. And I weave a nuanced narrative of why I believe everything, how it all kind of happened.
Okay, so you talk about sort of your journey and some of the things and people that came in and out of your journey, but then you also talk about the community of Bitcoin and crypto and the future, and you talk about NFTs and all kinds
Everything.
of crazy shit.
Yeah, anything that's related to crypto, turning trauma into success, health and wellness, Web3, metaverse, NFTs, Bitcoin, DAOs, blockchains, anything. I teach it all.
So it's nerd.
It's very nerd. It's very deep. Yeah, it's very deep show. But if I don't do it, no one's going to do it, because there aren't a lot of good deep shows out there that are explaining and putting this all together.
I've listened to a few episodes, and you make what on the surface seems to be a very hard to understand topic. You make it easily digestible. So I do appreciate that.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, no worries. I was just listening to the one you had today with the what's his name on it. It only came out a couple of hours ago, and I was right there listening.
Oh,
to
Fred Jin and Kenzie Wayne. Yeah. Those actually, I was very proud of that show, especially towards the middle. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get the show going, as you know. But once I got their flow going, it ended up being really good.
Yeah, I agree. It did. And yeah, right there with you. Sometimes it takes a minute or two to get into the flow of a good conversation. You mentioned earlier that it took a while or whatever, but you and Courtney were able to, I guess, get back into the position of being okay financially, financially secure. So what is it that you do every single day? How do you spend your time since you don't commute to a cubicle? What do you do all day? What's your daily life like?
I still commute. I have my office here and podcast studio. I'm recording about 4 to 5 days a week. So we have involvement of writing the show with the writers, preparing it, booking the guests, all that stuff. I'm also the general partner on a fund called Druid Ventures. We're an early stage VC fund. We're based in Tampa Bay. So that's one of my full-time jobs. A few years ago, I launched the Crypto Investor Network with a company called MarketWise. It's a publicly traded company. And we're 50,000 subscribers strong now. And so Courtney and I have to travel to Washington, D.C. once a month for about 3 days to shoot new master classes and work with our network there and put together our portfolio. So anyone who wants to join our Crypto Investor Network, they can go to investorplace.com and check it out. I have a free trial, and it's $100 after that. It's amazing. I love doing it. And then recently I produced 2 movies in the last year and a half or so. And what I mean is produce is when there's a script that Courtney likes, I try to help put the project together. So I help the project find financing. We don't put the money in ourselves unless there needs to be a stopgap, but it's easier to raise money for a film when studios know that you'll be the one putting it in if there's no gap raised. So it's a lot easier to do it that way. We just did our second sequel. We did a sequel to a film. That was called Ask Me to Dance. And we just shot a film in Scotland called Trauma Therapy Psychosis, which was the brainchild of Tom Malloy, David Lawrence, and Courtney. And so they put that project together. I got executive producer credit for that, but I didn't do anything. Nothing. I'm just Courtney's husband now, so they're giving me producer credit. It's I'm getting the benefit because I'm the actor's husband. It's really cool. But I'm just I just cheer people on. You guys can do it. Let's go. And the projects get made. It take a while, but they get made. So now we're going to work on the third movie. And I don't know what that is yet. We're thinking of maybe doing it as like Courtney and I's story, like a crypto love story. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think that your personal Bitcoin story, the two of you,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that'd be a great story. I mean, we got to see the social network about how all that stuff went down with those fools. It'd be great to see how it all went down with you and Courtney and Bitcoin and the Winklevi and prison and BitInstant. I think that would be a fucking fascinating story.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be. I just got to do the hard work and write it.
You won't. You're all talk. Before I let you go, where can people find you on social media?
You can follow me on Twitter at Charlie Shrem. There are a lot of scammers, a lot of them. In fact, if you follow me and you get a message from me asking you to invest in something, it's a scammer. So only follow my verified accounts if you can on Instagram and Twitter at Charlie Shrem. And then listen to my podcast, UntoldStories.com. Courtney and I are so accessible. You can reach out to us as long as you're not like a scammer or trying to do something shady or whatever. My email address is right there on Untold Stories. I hope everyone got a lot of value out of this.
I know I did, and I'm 100% sure that my streetwalkers did as well. And to bolster what you were saying about you and Courtney being accessible, there was no publicist, there was no agent, there was no manager. I reached out to both of you separately based on my conversation with Tom Malloy about Ask Me to Dance. I reached out to both of you separately, and you got back to me quickly and kindly, and I appreciate both of your time and your generosity of spirit and your willingness to sit down and have a conversation. I appreciate both of you. Tell her I said hello. Well, what am I doing? I know she's going to listen. Hi, Courtney.
Yeah, of course. Hi, Court. Yeah, she's amazing.
Lastly, before I let you go, is there anything we didn't talk about or I didn't ask you about that you specifically wanted to talk about?
You really covered everything in a perfect way. I think we got to the why. I hope we piqued everyone's interest, or at least changed their thoughts on, our beautiful space, our industry, whatever. Most things you can go out and learn yourself. And so, to quote Satoshi, if you don't have time to go out and learn it, then I don't have time to explain it to you.
Oh, that's a beautiful note to go out on. Charlie Shrem, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day and your hectic Bitcoin-filled schedule to hang out and let us get to know you a little bit better on Fascination Street, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
It was 100% my pleasure, and you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks a lot, man. Bye.
That was awesome.
Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2001 album Intransigence, used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is from the song Say My Name off the 2021 album Underdog Anthems, used with permission from Jax Hollow. If you like the show, tell a friend, subscribe, and rate and review the show on iTunes and wherever else you download podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. All the episodes are available there as well. Check me out on Vero at Fascination Street Pod and TikTok at Fascination Street Pod. And again, thanks for listening.